Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Purpose-Driven Leader Accelerating Social Mobility digital event. My name is Aaliyah and I am the Events Delivery Coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box. Feel free to ask any questions you have for the speakers and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I will now hand over to Katie Kelly, Chair, CMI London Board, to begin today's event.
Hi everyone, thank you Aaliyah, and good afternoon. Thank you for everyone that's attended across the world. I think we've got some people outside of the UK today as well, so very exciting. Really pleased to see so many of us here for what I know is going to be a thought-provoking and really insightful discussion around social mobility, and particularly the role that we as managers and leaders and our organisations can play in advancing it. So before I pass to our wonderful, knowledgeable panellists, who in summary are Joe Wood of Wiseup Networks, Shelley Ogilvie of the 93% Club, and Kirsten Lockwood of LABC, I'll just provide a quick introduction and a couple of my own humble thoughts. So as Aaliyah mentioned, my name is Katie Kelly. In my day job, I'm an Associate Partner and Connects Director at Argon & Co, where I lead transformation initiatives with organisations across multiple sectors to help them navigate change, develop their people, and build capabilities needed for the future of work. Alongside that, as Aaliyah mentioned, I also have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Chartered Management Institute's London Regional Board. And through that role, we work as a board and a community to bring together leaders across industries to help shape ideas, develop better management practices, and champion issues that matter to the future of leadership, one of which is obviously social mobility. So today's conversation sits quite nicely in between both my professional work and the work I do for the CMI as well, because improving social mobility is ultimately about creating workplaces where opportunity, talent and potential are recognised, regardless of background. Before we get started, I'd love to make this interactive straight away. So as well as introducing yourself, like some of you have already done in the comments section, I'd also like to understand what comes to mind when you do think about the term social mobility. And I'm going to play a video now that will just play in the background whilst you all have a think about that and pop in whatever comes to mind, a word or a phrase in the chat bar whilst the video plays. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that video and it gave you some food for thought. Please do continue thinking about what social mobility means for you and popping it in the chat. I see we've got some greetings from all over the world, especially jealous of the person that's joining us in the Seychelles. But please do continue to take part in the discussion and think about what that video might have meant to you and what social mobility means to you as well. For me, social mobility is ultimately about ensuring that where someone starts in life does not actually determine where they end up or their experience throughout their lives, especially in the workplace. It should be about talent, potential and opportunity and being recognised for that regardless of your background. And even though I will acknowledge, and as I'm sure my fellow panellists will as well, progress has been made, I still think that there's a significant gap. Social mobility is not a protected characteristic yet. I still believe that it should be, and many talented people simply don't get the same opportunities because of factors outside of their control, whether that's their accent, where they grew up, the schools they attended, the university they attended or didn't attend, and the networks they have access to can all significantly contribute to the lack of accelerated social mobility. And that's why conversations like today matter, because leaders and organisations have a real influence on changing this. And we have some great organisations being represented from our panellists today. We can help impact that through the way we recruit, the way we develop people, promote people, take part in events like this, and the environments we generally create at work can all reinforce barriers or actively remove them. So it's our opportunity and role to help remove those. And today we're going to explore what that looks like in practice. So hopefully we'll all take away some things we can actively put in place in our organisations. So for now, I'm delighted to introduce our first panellist, Jo Wood, co-founder of Wiseup Networks. And that's an organisation that connects students and employers, allowing the next generation to establish their first professional network and gain an advantage in their careers and make informed decisions on their future. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Jo Wood. I'm co-founder of Wiseup Networks, as Katie said. This topic is something very close to my heart. It's something I've dedicated the last 7 years of my life to, being the founder of a social enterprise with a very similar mission to what we're discussing on this webinar today. So just to give you some quick context, Wiseup Networks is an award-winning social enterprise that runs mentoring and work experience programs for young people in partnership with employers. So specifically, we partner with employers to upskill their staff to become mentors for young people in their area at our education provider partners. And then we facilitate a one-to-one mentoring program that takes place before, during and after a curated work experience week at their office or premises, wherever it is that they are offering that opportunity. We work with employers of all sizes, very large multinationals, but also lots of great SMEs as well across the country. So the work we do is aimed at providing opportunities for young people that don't necessarily have the personal or family connections to gain an advantage in their early career. We're supporting students that are 16, 17 years old at school or college, but also some university students that are in need of further support. And recently we have started to deliver programs specifically targeted at students with special educational needs and disabilities as well. So my passion is fair access to meaningful employer engagement for young people. So taking work experience specifically, right? I'm sure everyone in this session has noticed that it doesn't function the way it should do in the UK, and I believe it's actually fundamentally broken. No doubt everyone who's been in an organisation of any kind will have noticed that for most organisations, the only students that will come on work experience or visit or be engaged by that employer are often those who already have a family member or a connection to that business or to that industry. Now, of course, it's great to support those students, but we often don't see it alongside a concerted effort to offer that same access to business to young people who have zero connection to that business or that industry or that employer. So this issue is compounded by the fact that the education sector has an overwhelming task to find hundreds of placements and employer engagements for their students. And they often, unfortunately, have to say to their students, go and ask your own networks, your own family, your own friends to find these placements, which makes this issue more of a challenge. And that's what we are trying to address. I feel like the solution to this is very much in the control of leaders in business, and it's about putting together well thought out programs, investing the time to engage the community and build something meaningful for students. And yeah, like I say, the exciting thing is that if we face this problem head on, it's something we can solve as leaders in business. Thank you.
Amazing. Great to hear from you, Joe. And also thank you so much for having me here. It's great to meet you all. And yeah, it's lovely to be talking about this topic. As Joe mentioned, he's super passionate about it. And I know that everybody on this panel and on this call will be really passionate about driving social mobility, both from an organizational perspective, but equally, I'm sure each and every single one of us have a personal connection to this topic, including myself. And I think coming from a working class background, coming from a state school background, it's something that we, that needs leaders on the ground in everyday situations to be taking this seriously and looking at opportunities and strategies to approach driving social mobility from the ground up, because that's how it works. But yes, so really happy to be here. My name is Shelley. I am the head of professionals at the 93% Club. Hopefully some of you, when I say the 93% Club, will have recognized that name. But for those who don't, we are essentially a charity that is focused on transforming what it means to be state educated in Britain. If you aren't aware, 93% of the UK is state educated, although I think it might be ticking up to 94% now, but we'll just put that to the side for the purposes of our organization's name. But 93% of the UK is state educated. However, it's the other 7% that are making up far higher percentages of the top jobs. And so what we exist to do is help those coming from state school or working class backgrounds or low socioeconomic backgrounds to get in and then also to get on. Once they're in, there is that huge challenge to also get on. And I think a lot of the social mobility work that's been done over the last decade, which is fantastic, has been heavily focused on access, which is a primary issue. But now we've got great strategies when it comes to access and opportunity, but now we're also not saying that the problem is fixed. There is still a lot of work to do there, but there is a lack of focus on the getting on piece, and that is something that we try to bring into the charity's aim. So it's a holistic approach to driving social mobility. There are so many different social mobility charities out there doing amazing work on getting in, enabling those who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds to get in, and in so many different ways. For the 93% Club, where we sort of put our stake in the ground, or what we believe in will drive social mobility, is enabling people to build social capital. And it's that social capital that drives the right networks, the community, to be able to progress and open up opportunities and belonging, and what we believe truly accelerates social mobility. In terms of some of the topics we'll go in today around the strategies on how you actually do that and be a purpose-driven leader, of course, those CDP and workshops are really valuable and needed, and should be a crucial part of any strategy. But what we really fundamentally believe, and I personally fundamentally believe as well, is that the power is really in connection. So we did a survey last year culminating around 10,000 state educated voices. So both students, but primarily professionals at various seniority levels, talking about their experience of getting in and getting on. And the stats for that just show the power when it comes to connection. So 88% of working class professionals had no personal contacts in their industry before entering it. 92% of state schoolers say they have no alumni network to turn to. That's no contacts, no shortcuts, no safety net, no person they can tap up just to say, hey, how does this work? Who's the right person for me to speak to? How do I navigate this career path? And 95% believe there are unwritten rules to getting on. And I do think that's something probably a lot of us who are state educated or come from working class backgrounds can resonate with, that there isn't a real rule book that's given to you when you start anywhere. And I think having those networks is really the access to getting that rule book. So if you don't have them, how do you navigate those environments? And the survey shows that as well. So 97% say those rules, that unspoken rule book, are much easier to navigate if you're from a privileged background, because someone's there to kind of open up those doors for you and demystify things for you. So we can get into some of those specific strategies as we get into the conversation today, and that's what this session will all be about. But I think just to highlight a few that really encompass the building of social capital and how you enable people in your teams and in your organization to do that. It's about looking at strategies that foster growing connection and belonging, not just those formal programs. Thinking about conscious succession planning. So who is it that you're actively bringing along in your own teams? Are you spotting those that are, well connected already, who are getting those opportunities, but also spotting those who maybe don't have connections and maybe falling to the back, but are brilliant, but don't have anyone to be that sponsor or advocate that people desperately need in today's working environment, because that is how you get ahead. Also looking at things like mentorship plus sponsorship, because it's not one or the other. Mentorship is all about providing advice and guidance, but the sponsorship means putting people who are actively overlooked back into the conversation and being that spotlight, especially from a senior perspective. That's the sort of stuff that really breaks down the barriers when it comes to getting on. And we can see through both our research, but also research from organizations like the Bridge Group, it shows that diverse talent progresses faster when they have that genuine sponsorship and community, and not just the training. It really is a collaborative approach and a multifaceted approach that is going to enable us to tackle this national challenge, really. So before I hand over to the next speaker to introduce themselves, I'd love to just kind of put a question in the mind of everyone here, which is, as management, as leaders in your own organizations, you are really that curtain that when they pulls back the unspoken rule book and opens up opportunities and opens up clarity when it comes to navigating professional environments and progression. So how are you making that curtain accessible to those around you? That's everything for me from now, but I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shelley. That was really interesting, and especially the stats that you put in there, 7% making up the majority of roles. So yeah, the situation can be dire, especially in some industries more than others. So hello, everyone. I'm Kirsten Lockwood. I'm the head of professional development at an organization called LABC, which stands for Local Authority Building Control. So in my role, I'm responsible for our also award-winning learning pathways and qualifications. And those are for new talent looking to enter, but also existing talent that's looking to upskill. So we're looking at both of those pools. A little background on building control. Well, probably most people here have never heard of it, unless you've done a kitchen extension or an alteration to your property. It's relatively unknown, but it's a regulated profession and key to public safety in the built environment. So we are historically very under-resourced and often referred to as a Cinderella service. We had a demographic of aging white middle-class men nearing retirement. And so we were at a sort of precipice in about 2008 where we needed to look at how we did things and did things differently. So really, I'm here. You can see that Shelley and Joe are in organizations that are focused very much on social mobility. I'm coming from a corporate perspective and how we did that internally. So I'm just here really to share my experience on what we did. And as Shelley said, talk about how we got people in and then help them to get on. So I suppose social mobility for us was less about diversity, and really with those demographics, it was more about building resilience. That was what we were focusing on. But we knew in order to do that, we needed to think very differently about how we attracted and then developed and supported in what Shelley referenced as a collaborative, supportive environment. And that was specifically for new talent, while the existing talent was almost looking to move on. So we had some problems, and those were that, as I mentioned earlier, people just don't know what building control is. So if they don't know their career exists, and if they don't know how to enter it, and also if they don't see themselves reflected in the people that are doing the job, then they're very unlikely to want to join. So we had a look at what we could do, and we started with greater visibility of the role. And we focused greater visibility to wider talent pools. And we ran campaigns that were reflective of the audience types that we wanted to attract. We talked about the role and its professional status, so that people were attracted to that, but also social impact, because young people today, from our experience, seem to really care about making a difference. And then we looked at linking the role to their transferable skills. So let's move away from experience on their CVs, having had done the job, and let's talk about how they could get into the job. But we also saw that we needed to create more structured development pathways. So people needed to see, once they got in the door, Shelley said, how do they move through it and become successful? And in the past, in building control, there weren't any qualifications or formal learning pathways. So we had to create those. Trainees learned from someone they happened to be plonked down next to in a local authority, and it was all down to that person, how much time they wanted to give them, and if that person was even competent or willing to put the effort into developing that person. So we could see that advancement across the country nationally was inconsistent and also unclear. So having a look at what talent wanted to see, I think they wanted to see development pathways from us that were clear and relevant to the role that they were actually going to do, and structured. And they wanted to see that these included formal education. A lot of people actually like having a qualification. And that they were linked to competency frameworks, because we wanted to assess them on what they could do and not what or who they knew. And the other part was that collaboration of a structured mentoring program and structured experience when they were in the role. From our perspective, we had to put people into local authorities. So that was a secondment. We hire them, we pay their salaries, but we're reliant on that local authority to give them that experience. And so that's why that structured mentoring and experience was put in place, to make sure everyone had that equal opportunity to learn in the same way. So our talent needed to see from us that the progression once they were in was fair and supported. And that success was measured not on, as Shelley said, who they know or where they're from or what school or university they went to, but competence and what they could demonstrate that they could actually do. So we also changed the way we recruited. And instead of just experience, like I said, we looked at their transferable skills. We set up, instead of just doing an interview for an hour, we set up assessment centres where we looked at everything that they could do. We gave them a technical task, a written test to test their communication skills, a short interview, and a group exercise. So we could really see all the skills and give them a fair chance at being accepted. And this ensured that we hired on potential and not just on past experience. And, you know, finally, through wider visibility, the campaigns that we ran that were reflective of those audiences that we wanted to attract from wide and diverse backgrounds, with these clear development pathways and structured collaborative supports infrastructure and these impartial assessments of success in the role, we created an attractive career with clear, fair progression routes. And the result was that we had record numbers of applicants. 2,000 plus was our first intake that we had to work through. And they were from diverse backgrounds and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Shelley. Amazing, insightful points. And 3 of my top takeaways just so far before we get into the questions. Joe, you mentioned that Wiseup Networks has started focusing on supporting those with special educational needs. And I think that highlighted a really good point, because intersectionality matters. So kind of being from a lower socioeconomic background and having special educational needs will inhibit your progression and access to the same opportunities of people from other groups even more. I read a stat the other day from the Social Mobility Commission, which talks about the fact that this might have changed. I think the study was a few years old, but I'm sure that the sentiment is still the same. £6,800 is the amount that someone from a working class background will get paid less a year compared to those from affluent backgrounds. But if you're a woman from a working class background, that doubles again in comparison to your male working class peers. So yeah, I think we always have to have intersectionality on top of mind on this as well. And Shelley, you talked about 93% clubs get in and get on. So as you say, it's not just about access, it's about making sure you're supporting people. And I love what you said about sponsorship. I think lots of people confuse mentorship or sponsorship and think they're one and the same. They're definitely not. You can have conversations with a mentor, but actually advocating for someone when they're not in the room is being a sponsor. And we need people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and other diverse groups to have active sponsors that will kind of support them and wave their flag when they're not in the room as well as when they are as well. And Kirsten, I love what you said about kind of building a diverse workforce, not just for building a diverse workforce for the sake of it. It's actually about building organisational resilience. We will have all heard many stats about organisations that are diverse are often more successful and profitable. So it's good for business, not just ethically as well. So thank you all for those points. Really interesting topics covered there. We've got some questions that have appeared in the chat bar. If you do have a question that's prompted from any of the presentations or anything else, then please do put it into the chat. I'm going to just kick things off with a opening question that I'm going to direct to all of the panelists, so feel free to chip in as you wish. When we talk about social mobility, what does success actually look like in 2026 for young people when entering education or the workforce? So what does success look like in the here and now?
I'm happy to kick things off. I think looking at this question, you can kind of look at it in two ways in terms of what we see currently, what people actually value as success at the moment, and then also what it should be. So I'm going to come at it from that angle. I think in terms of what we see currently in the market and in the current workforce is there is a real lean towards a skills economy. And so success for a lot of people entering in the workforce or education are looking at how do I build skill sets that I can pull upon throughout my career. It's not necessarily just about diving into one long-term career path, but actually looking at ways they can gain and gather experiences. And within that, what they're looking for is the confidence in their early career to be able to build a long-term, exciting career that they can navigate and maneuver down the various different avenues that seem exciting to them. And within that, so whilst building those skills, building that confidence, what they're looking for is that early progression. I think a lot of people entering the work market want to be able to progress quickly so they can achieve both things as quickly as possible. However, I'd add to that from the other side in terms of what success should look like, knowing that these are key factors that people are after. I think a key part of supporting people to do that is success has to include that belonging piece, not just the sort of access and development, but also how do you make people feel like they are part of something as they're developing those skill sets or confidence, as belonging is what underpins both of those avenues and their ability to do so. Like I said previously, we spent a decade getting people through the door. So the next decade has to really be about what happens when they're on the inside. Are they progressing? Are they advocating for themselves? Do they feel like they can bring their full self to work? Or are they still code switching, shrinking, shape shifting just to be able to be taken seriously? And so, yeah, I think to sum up, the sort of success that we're looking for is that a working class professional or someone who comes from a low socioeconomic background doesn't have to choose between their identity and their career to be able to build the skills and confidence and connections that they want. But they're in an environment or an organization that enables them to belong so they can do all those things in their early career and break through those class-based progression gaps that you brought up as well, Katie.
Yes, for sure. I mean, what my most important takeaway from what you just said is about belonging. I think that people use the terms inclusion and belonging interchangeably, and they're completely different. People can be included in the workplace, feel like they belong. And as you say, there's lots of people that feel that they have to mask their real selves in different situations, be that friends, family, work, anything else. And actually, there's a really good video on the CMI website that I'll try and find the link to and pop in the chat bar, which talks about people's personal experiences of that. And how exhausting it is when you're having to mask who you really are. You have to have completely different personas and switch between them, and you're not going to perform your best if you have to do that.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And that's that point, is that people aren't able to then do the things that they actually want to be able to do because they're trying to navigate this minefield.
Exactly. So I think that you're exactly right. People feeling a sense of belonging and not having to mask themselves would definitely be a top indicator of success. How we measure that, I don't know. That's the next challenge, but it's definitely something that should be top of everyone's agenda, I think, as leaders and managers in organisations. Thank you, Shelley.
I think us on the opposite side of what Shelley's doing, obviously people need to be themselves, but also the way that you assess their success needs to be anonymous. So we've worked really hard at competency assessment where the marker can't tell who's actually written the assessment. It's not down to how much they like that individual, it's down to their actual skills and their remuneration and their progression and their registration as part of the profession is all based on that competency assessment. So they're not held back by any of those biases, which they can't control as much as they want to bring themselves. And some people might be open to it. There's always others that aren't. There's always prejudice that we're never going to get rid of. So I think it's important to have that in mind and have those safeguards in place to protect them and make sure that they can progress regardless of who they work with that we can't control.
Yeah, for sure. It's a shame that in 2026 we still do have to have a focus on anonymising things, whether it's assessments or CVs, etc. But yeah, I think it's the fairest approach to it. And so definitely something that people should take as a kind of widespread tactic, I think, in any term of recruitment or development assessment. It shouldn't be about your characteristics, it should be about your skill.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I think for me this year, I'd like to see, I suppose, more from a pragmatic partnership point of view. I'd like to see that gap between education and business being shortened with, meaningful, visible partnerships between schools, colleges, universities, and the workplace. Now, universities do this far better than schools and colleges already, of course, because of the age of the students, and it naturally offers itself to that. But with the rise of apprenticeships and things like that, businesses do need to start looking outside of that university pool and looking at schools, colleges, and putting together meaningful partnerships. I currently don't see that in the education providers that we work with. I don't see it in a lot of the businesses we approach and end up working with to help them do this. I don't see that structured partnership between schools, colleges that are on their doorstep. So I just think that's something that I would like to see more of, be at top of the agenda for early careers teams across industries, where if you don't have kind of any kind of engagement with your local education providers, it's addressing that with, it could just be going in doing a careers talk, to begin with, but then it could also be more meaningful programs, placements, helping them with work experience, helping them with mentoring opportunities, which requires time and effort. But I think that's where we need to get to. I don't see it currently, and I think that's, if we can make progress on that in this year and see it talked about at a higher level, more visibility. We had our local MP raise this point in Parliament the other day, and we are looking to get a meeting with the Secretary of State at the moment around how we can raise that profile and enable the private sector to do this in a structured way and really put things in place, agreements in place, processes in place where they are connected to young people in their area, and they're not picking and choosing which kind of education provider that is. So yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I completely agree what you said. Like, essentially, in summary, collaboration is the most powerful thing. Solving the issue of social mobility, or the issue of social mobility, to accelerate social mobility isn't going to happen by one organisation or one person. It's definitely a complex ecosystem of organisations, be that schools, colleges, universities, government, charities, industry. And I think that we see that in many different guises. I think collaboration was probably my most used word last year. I did quite a lot of work in the energy sector and talk about how collaboration between organisations can help drive the net zero agenda. That definitely applies here as well. And we need to incentivise organisations to collaborate with others, especially when they are commercial organisations and it might not necessarily be commercially viable for them. We need to provide that incentive for them as well, because we're going to be stronger and more powerful if we work together and solve this as well. So thank you all. I'm going to go to a question that was asked earlier on in the webinar. It's from King Legacy. Thank you for your question. So the question was, as they wrote it, if you were working on building your own business, does it count as an experience? And I chose this in particular to kind of raise with each of you. what do you think that people can do where they might not necessarily have access to traditional work experience? And perhaps, Joe, I'll come to you as well. How can they get that experience? Because I've always been, I'm from a kind of fairly working class background and have had to work before I got a proper job, and took that experience from volunteering, through sitting on youth panels, being involved in community groups as well, which has actually worked in my favour going forward and helped me get a job at the end. So what can people do, like starting their own business, to get that work experience that might not be through the traditional route?
Yeah, I think it's about, at the end of the day, what you're trying to get across to organizations is how you approach problems, how you approach opportunities, how you think. And that's essentially what experience is proof of, right? It's how you've approached things in the past. And I think if it's not talking about previous jobs, there's enough resources out there now and available that you can self-teach a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge. You can show competency. You can write your own white papers and publish them on your own website and say, and you can show and you can build a personal brand outside of opportunities with a contract at an employer, right? LinkedIn, great way to do that. Being a thought leader on certain topics, doing your research, and starting a business. I didn't work for anyone from my mid-20s to my late 20s because I was starting a business, but there's far more for me to talk about in terms of what I learned in those years than there is from my corporate jobs before that, but by far, because it's different skills, it's creativity, it's entrepreneurship, it's about learning that language as well, which is a key part of social capital, which we were discussing before, in that it's trying to understand how you talk about any experience, but in the kind of language that employers and hiring managers kind of look for. And it's, again, a bit of an education piece on, you might not think that designing your own website or doing or for something that was a bit of a side hustle one day or whatever, you might not think that's experience or something to talk about. Actually, it's creativity, it's designing processes, it's UX, UI, it's all these things, it's marketing, and it's about just putting that into the right words. I think anything can be useful.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I think your point about language there is an important one generally, because people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds aren't normally exposed to that kind of professional language. If you're not, if you don't have members of your family that are part of those worlds, you won't have heard the kind of language that resonates in job interviews or when you get to an organisation as well. And so that's important that kind of people are exposed to that, or kind of expose themselves to that if they can't be exposed through their natural networks. For sure, completely agree. Has anybody else got anything to add to that question around what people can do that isn't classed as traditional work experience?
I agree with the fact that you don't actually need to have the experience, but you just need to demonstrate the skills. So it's about being clever about how you link your skills to the role that it is that you're trying to get into. And that's when we did our assessment centers. Those were the things that really made people stand out, when they understood the role that they were applying for, and they were transparent. I don't have the experience, but I've done this, this, and this, and that's why I think this makes me a fantastic candidate. This is what I'll bring to the role. The worst part is when someone shows up to an interview and you ask them, what do you know about X, the role? And they can't explain it to you. And that's the worst thing you can do. So yeah, I think everybody's looking for talent, and I think everyone is open-minded. Well, from my experience, I know there are places that look for degrees, but I just think that's shrinking a lot more now. And we need people that are disruptive and can diversify. And you need to be able to bring that in front of an employer and show them how you're different, but also how you're the same.
Yes, yeah, I like that. Yeah, showing them how you're different, how you've gone out of your way to expose yourself to those kind of experiences ahead of going into the job market. Hugely important. And actually, before I ask Shelley if you've got anything to add, I'll just pick up again on something that Joe said around your brand. Like, we are living in a world now where digital means like LinkedIn give you access to millions of people. You can write your own blogs, as you said, Joe. You can connect with people that you've never met. So physical networks are less important when you can reach out at the touch of a button and start building your own brand as well. So massive fan of using LinkedIn to raise your own brand and connect with people as well. Shelley, did you have anything to add on that question? Otherwise, I
guess it follows on really nicely from what you were just saying as well, Katie, around, I think if you're someone who's looking at, I've got unconventional experience in trying to look at access points, or, language is a huge part, but equally the networks are a huge part. And I think that even understanding how you can position your experience it's so much more powerful when it comes through the insights you get from someone who maybe has worked in that field before, or who can connect you to someone in that organization, or who can just, like I mentioned at the beginning, peel back that curtain a little bit. I think those points around language, around leverage, building your personal brand, all of that is so much easier when you have that insight, that in to someone who can give you that advice. So I would say finding those connections and building those relationships that will enable you to learn the skills you need to be able to put yourself forward, but also find those people that can be that advocate internally to vouch for you, as a sense of they haven't gone a traditional route, but they're really great, have sort of know them outside of traditional means, but they're really good, and you should give them a chat and have a conversation, open up peel back the curtain on what sort of things they might be asked and how they should approach that. All of that is what enables someone to put their best foot forward. And it's that community piece again about leveraging your community and focusing on that, as well as sort of the amount of applications you're making or where you're actually applying to, but the chance you're giving yourself to build a network that you can lean on in those situations too.
Thank you. And I'll give everybody kind of hints to what I'm going to ask at the end around pulling back the curtain and how we make that accessible. Everyone should have a think about that, because I'm going to pledge something myself and ask everyone if they can too. Thank you, everybody. I'll move on to next question, which I'm going to pose to Joe initially. From your vantage point, working with schools, universities, employers, where are we seeing the biggest barriers? And we did touch on this earlier, but if you would like to elaborate or add anything else. So the biggest barriers to social mobility.
Yeah, I think I'll just expand on what I alluded to earlier around actually the education providers themselves and just the nature of them as organizations. I think that they've got a bit of an uphill battle to address this problem without any help. I think that personally, from what the kind of programs we run in the kind of mentoring work experience world, the access that the students get to opportunities is often entirely reliant on the networks that exist within the people that work at the school, or the people or the schools themselves. And therefore, if you have that, and that's why you get, if a school is in more affluent area, whatever it is, and the people who work there are more affluent from different backgrounds or have networks in different industries, they're more likely to be able to fulfill that need. And then in schools where there's lower funding, there's less staff dedicated to careers, to being a careers lead or a placement organizer or whatever it is. Often this falls to teachers, and it often falls to staff who are doing it off the side of their desk, and it just means that that cannot be the reason that a student doesn't have access to something, and that's where the business world needs to step in and support our education providers, because they cannot do it all in terms of the amount of placements and engagements they can organize. So that is a big barrier. The other one is kind of we've obviously we have touched upon it a little bit, but around cultural capital in general. I know we've talked about social capital as part of that, but I don't know how much people have kind of come in contact with cultural capital as a concept, but there's different types of cultural capital. There's embodied cultural capital, which is someone's knowledge, behavior, skills, which is kind of what we're talking about, that exposure to that language, the way people talk and position themselves, the reason that we can walk into a meeting room, sit down and know how to present ourselves. That's a big barrier, and we see it a lot with students going in on work experience. that's why we offer a bit of mentoring before they turn up, because it's about like what's expected of you in that environment. How do you dress? How do you talk? How do you, and it's kind of understanding what's acceptable, what's not. That's something that is a barrier for a lot of young people, and it unfortunately puts employers off, which it shouldn't do. In that first few days, a lot go, "Ooh, that's not how I would have said that." It's like, well, yes, you need to teach and you need to guide, right? And that's what we try and help them do. There's objectified cultural capital as well, which is kind of your access to resources and things that you can learn from out there. And I think, again, if you're around these kind of networks that can point you to, well, why don't you just do this online course or this or whatever, it's, you kind of get ahead from others that don't know those things exist. And so it's about how do we get education providers putting the right resources in front of their students if they don't know about them themselves. And then you've got kind of institutionalized cultural capital, which is finally, your qualifications, your professional certifications. It's knowledge of, when I started my career as a project manager when I came out of education. I had no idea what project management was until someone just told me, a friend of mine told me about it, and then told me to look at Prince 2 as a professional certification, for example. I had no idea, no one had ever mentioned it. But why would they as well? A lot of education providers, there's so many jobs, so many certifications. Why would they know about that? And it's kind of, again, that's where the business community needs to enlighten students on these things, because education cannot do it all. It's not their entire remit, and so it's difficult. So yeah, all of that kind of leads to the main barrier, which is kind of that fair access to this stuff, and it's fair access to the workplace, and that's what I've seen over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. I think exposure to career types, as you suggested, that you potentially didn't know what a project manager was at the start. I definitely didn't know what a management consultant was, like when I was at university. So, like, I still don't, I don't think. Another time. That'll be the next webinar, everyone. But like you're exposed kind of at a young age to the kinds of careers that your parents do. My mum was a teacher, for instance, so I immediately considered, do I want to become a teacher, until she heavily put me off of that. But yeah, you need to be exposed to different career paths, different support in terms of resources or people that can explain what those are and how you might prepare to go into that career field, because it's not always immediately obvious, is it? So yeah, for sure. We had one question, well, actually two that are similar, actually, that I'd like to actually pick on, and I'm not sure what the answer is here, but we've talked a lot about access to employment opportunities and young people as well, but obviously social mobility can happen and should happen at every point of your life, and we mentioned intersectionality earlier. Obviously, people in the later stages of their lives often find it difficult to move up in organisations. So how, when you compound that with people that are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, how, this is a question from Jennifer E. Anderson, how you handle improving social mobility for existing older employees who may be struggling to find opportunities to move up through the ranks. So it's not just about young people. How do we tackle it from an older person's perspective?
I can pop in here as a starting point. I really think that a lot of the similar principles apply, in the sense that we've talked a lot about mentorship in this conversation so far. And I do think that it's not something that stops. It's not just about, someone who's super senior mentoring someone who's really junior. Sometimes what we've seen play out really well is peer-to-peer networking, or sort of people closer in sort of career levels, but who have experienced that progression that they're after. And again, just peeling back, I keep saying peeling back the curtain because it's the kind of topic of the day, but it is really that connection to someone who can say, these are the things that I did, these are the people to speak to, and then that opens up that access to senior sponsorship as well. And so the mentorship and sponsorship can work hand in hand. But I don't think the approach is hugely different. I think it's really about connecting them with people internally who can open up those streams. And actually, something I didn't mention in the sort of introduction piece is how the 93% Club essentially exists in two communities, and the point of the communities is to connect those both either pre-starting their career or within their career at all different levels with others to be able to build the social capital and, like Joe mentioned, the cultural capital to get ahead in their careers. And so one of the things we do is mentorship, but primarily focusing a lot on that peer-to-peer mentoring. So sometimes the matches we'll make won't be that big gap between them, but more so about that someone who's just a couple of steps ahead, who can just be that person you can lean upon to be like, how are you getting ahead? How are you getting those opportunities? How are you talking? Or even, like Joe, you mentioned, like sitting in a meeting and knowing how to present yourself in a way that spotlights to a senior professional or more senior professional who's got the influence and power to give you that progression, to show them that you're ready for those opportunities. Because as coming from, low socioeconomic backgrounds and working class backgrounds, there's no one in my career path, and for a lot of people who come from similar backgrounds, who could do that for me, or no one in my background, rather, should I say, that could do that for me. So I think that mentorship piece is huge, both from an early career perspective and someone, a bit further down the line looking to achieve that progression.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I've said this already. I'm a massive fan of mentorship, but more importantly, sponsorship. And you touched on something there, Shelley, about having someone that you can relate to that's only a couple of steps ahead, that's kind of progressed more recently, that you kind of see that you have more in common with, and it actually feels real, rather than the CEO of the company
exactly
mentoring someone that's middle management, and you just don't see yourself, and you see like it's years and years and years, if not decades away before you'll get there. Real life experience from someone a couple of steps ahead, I think, is really, really powerful. I completely agree there.
But I think you've got to take into consideration that older employees have different responsibilities as well, in terms of often in the home. And so where your younger employees can dedicate a lot of time to their own professional and personal development, the older ones are a little bit limited. So when Jennifer's asking, how can the employer create pathways for older employees, it's about looking at those barriers that they're experiencing and building pathways that promote ways for them to accelerate through their career. And we've done that with our tiered competency assessment framework. It doesn't stop. It's got specific tiers, and you just keep working through them, and you can just keep growing and progressing. But there are different ways of learning. Not everyone has to do a qualification or commit to a specific type of program. You can do things differently. It has to match the individual and their circumstances, and not have them fall behind because they can't dedicate the same amount of time.
Yeah, completely agree. There's not one linear pathway, is there, to kind of career development for everyone. There's no one size fits all. And we have to go to the effort to make sure that everyone has the same access, regardless of their circumstances outside of work. Yeah, completely agree. Thank you. Thanks all. Actually, this one's going to be directed at you initially as well, Kirsten. So there's a lot of talk about talent pipelines. Are they really broken, or are we simply looking for talent in the wrong places?
I don't think that pipelines are broken, but I do think often they are hidden. And like I mentioned earlier, for example, in building control, many people just didn't know that the career existed. And when we made it visible, we found that the talent was just always there. So broadening that visibility, talent just naturally came to us. And I said it earlier that we found that when we were struggling to get one or two applicants, we ended up with a pool of 2,000 plus to work from, and from diverse backgrounds. I mean, we have a picture of our first intake of over 100 people, and it's just, there's not many people that look the same. It's all very different and diverse, and we're really, really proud of that. But one surprising outcome as well, which we found, and Joe also mentioned it, and I think if you do things right, and you treat people properly, and you collaborate, and you engage, they'll be proud of the program that they've gone through, and they'll talk about it. And we found that that's what was happening. These people going through our program were taking to LinkedIn and just talking about the recruitment experience and the experience of learning and the development and the support and the pride in what they had achieved and their success. And following on from that, we've had even more interest in people wanting to join the profession. So yeah, I think visibility is very key to making sure that people know that you're there, and then know, how do I, as Shelley said, get in, how do I get on, and seeing themselves reflected in that profession as well, people like them.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, role modeling, definitely. Yeah, very, very important. And yeah, we've touched on this a number of times: visibility, exposure, access, all kind of running themes throughout every question we've answered in today's discussion. So it's all about raising awareness and making sure people have access to resources, people, opportunities, that we all have a part to play in as managers and leaders as well. Thank you very much. Just going to go on. I will pose this to Shelley initially. We've talked a lot about getting in, but getting on. So this is asking you to elaborate on that. So once someone joins an organisation, what needs to change so that social mobility isn't just about access, but is about progression?
Yeah, I think, not to sound like a bit of a broken record, but I think it's the two kind of key things that come to my mind around this is the sponsorship as well, alongside the mentorship. And that isn't just on the responsibility of those within the organization who are looking to, achieve social mobility, but it very much is on the employers and the direct leaders as well. So not just the organization itself, but equally those who are in positions of leadership, the position to progress, and who control progression in some form or shape. And so tying those two strategies together, ensuring there are mentorship programs and pathways, as Kirsten was talking about, but that they link also to opportunities to connect beyond the organization. And so that there's not just a homogenous sort of, there's only one certain pool they can pull off, because there also can be a bit of challenge with that when the only ways to progress and grow and learn is through the organization. There's already a bit of a barrier there too, in terms of some may not feel that they can, leverage those pathways as authentically as they would like to. And so having those, opening up pathways for connections outside of the organization to people in similar positions, or again, role models beyond, is a really powerful way that organizations can set themselves apart as well, in terms of how they're enabling people to be able to progress and belong outside of the organization, not just within, the space that they've occupied at that firm, but equally just belonging in the career stage that they are at. And as an employer, if you're enabling that, I think that creates a lot of affinity that enables retention as well, and enables people to stay for longer. Talked about the sponsorship that needs to pair with that too. And I think culminating around all of this is that community piece. If you're connecting them with a solid community internally that sits around your CPDs, sits around your pathways and frameworks that enable progression too, I think not only will you enable better engagement through those pathways, but a lot better psychological safety when it comes to exploring those pathways and navigating those, but equally how you're enabling community beyond the organization, so that they don't have to just lean on what they have right in front of them, but they have multiple avenues that they can get real, authentic, honest insight and be their authentic self with, is what's really crucial. And that's what we're sort of working with organizations to do, to understand how they can, give their employees a way to tap into a community that is full of people that look like them or come from backgrounds that they come from, and very relevant to the sector, but then isn't just within the organization. So they can bring that information, those insights back to the organization, and again, build their influence in another way.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think, kind of expanding your reach as far as you can is only going to help, right? And organizations, businesses should encourage that amongst their teams for sure, and enable that. I'm going to just pick up on one question before I ask everybody for their kind of main takeaway from today. But I saw it, and I have a personal story about how I've done this, so I'd like to share. So it's a question from Michelle Smith. Joe obviously talked a lot about gaining cultural capital. So Michelle's question is, how did you personally gain cultural capital to essentially learn to talk the talk? And my personal story with this is not an advert for the CMI as such, but it involves my involvement in the CMI. When I became a management consultant, which was about 3 years into my career, when I finally worked out what it was, Joe, I realised that networks were going to be very important. I previously worked in the public sector. Networking amongst your peers wasn't seen as important. I went there and I kind of did my job, and I built lots of skills, but I knew that becoming a consultant meant I would be more successful if I had a bigger network. And I actually saw an advert for a volunteer position in the CMI events team. And I thought that would be a good way to gain some cultural capital, learn about other industries, expand my network. So that would be kind of my personal story. And that was 12 years ago or something like that. So I did that very early on in my career, and I would encourage anybody else talking about involvement in external organisations. look out, see what's out there, and get involved and use that as a way to gain cultural capital. Don't just be limited to your personal networks, your family, friends, or even the organisation that pays your wages. There's other ways that you can gain that as well. So just wanted to pick up on that. We are at time now. I'm going to ask each of the panellists if you can just give your one takeaway, and I'll also add, which is a new one, what you're going to pledge to do to peel back the curtain, as Shelley put it, and make what's behind the curtain more accessible to for social mobility, people looking for that. So I'll come, Joe, first. Do you mind giving us your one takeaway and what you're pledging?
Yeah. Okay. Well, one takeaway would be, I think that access to employers cannot be left up to the students themselves and the education providers themselves. And it's on us as business leaders to make that change. My commitment is I will continue to grow the partnerships that we work across Wiseup, across the country, to work with more employers and allow them to run concerted and well considered and curated programs to make that connection with students.
Thank you. Go to the left. Shelley, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. My big takeaway actually is something that Joe mentioned around the partnerships piece, which I think links all of us together in various different ways. And the point that social mobility on a systemic level cannot be achieved without partnerships and without organizations like Joe's, like 93% Clubs, like Kirsten's, have to work together to support those, whether that's students, whether that's professionals, to be able to unlock those opportunities. And also sharing some of the insights, like the learnings that Kirsten, you shared, I think are going to be incredible for people to take away about how they can actually start to implement this. And same with yourself, Joe, from Wiseup, and the things that you're doing at the very early grassroots levels to be able to open up opportunities. If we're not sharing those connections, how can we really make a holistic change? So that's my big takeaway. The second thing, in terms of pledge, in a similar way, I think we're working with a lot of organizations to look at pathways to open up access, but also open up belonging and community for professionals and students. Something I'm personally doing, which I love, is a part of the 93% Club, is something that we call Support a Student, which is a way for professionals who come from working class backgrounds or state educated backgrounds to pay it forward to the next generation through a 15-minute coffee chat. And I had one of my first ones. So I joined the 93% Club about a year ago. And so I've been working with the professionals community in lots of different ways, but recently connected with one of the students and just working with her and just sharing all the things that I can dump into from my mind of the things I picked up over my career, and just little tidbits of information that, as in that first conversation, was just, I could tell from her it was eye-opening, even though it seems like something that I've just picked up along the way. And so that's my pledge, is to continue to do that regularly through the community. And I would encourage others to do the same as well. Find one person that you can deposit some of your learnings you've picked up in your career and do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think my key learning, something I'd never heard of before, thank you, Joe, is cultural capital. And that really landed with me. What you're exposed to, what is your everyday, you just think it's natural and everybody knows how to do it. I have noticed some people not knowing how to use Outlook and send emails, but there are, it's deeper than that. So I'm going to take that away and really look into it and see how I can support people more with those barriers that might exist and the judgments that might come from that. Shelley, the peer-to-peer informal networks for older or more experienced employees, as well as younger people. But I think for that, we might have a bit more of a gap. We have more formal peer-to-peer networks, but a space where people can feel safe to talk about things where they might not feel safe elsewhere. I think we'll take that away. And the other thing I think I need to have a look at is getting feedback from the people that we feel that we're doing a really good job, but are we really? So trying to get feedback and see, do you really feel like you can move through once you've come in the door, or were there barriers, and what were they, and how can we address those? So those will be my top three.
Thank you. And I'll give my own final last pledge before I pass back to Aaliyah to just close off. We've talked about collaboration and partnership, and I failed to mention as well that my organisation, Argon & Co, partner with the 93% Club and have seen how powerful it is. So my personal pledge is to continue kind of collaborating with others on an individual and organisational basis. And I'll invite anybody that's joined today or is listening after the event to connect with any of us on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation, continue the collaboration, ask more questions, propose mentorship. Our inboxes are open, so please find us all on LinkedIn and to continue the conversation. So that's what I will pledge to do as well. And thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, such insightful thoughts and conversations, and thank you to everybody that's been so engaged as part of the discussion as well. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone once again, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's it for today's session. Thank you to Katie, Joe, Kirsten and Shelley for your insight and expertise. Stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you for joining us.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.